Most of the times I can. Good morning. This is Ladena Bough from Stockton, Missouri, and we're on Trials and Triumphs today. Our guest today will be Garry Shidler. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I can never say his name right, so please forgive me. And we have here with us today Jaidyn LaBorde, and we want to bless you this morning because Jaidyn's going to sing a song that was written about Garry's life.
Ready?
Go ahead.
Alrighty. Running away from such a hard life, right into the life of crime. Spend my days in and out of prison, wrapped up in 25 years of addiction. Those who knew me had given up. I felt alone and I felt lost. Got out with $58 and a Bible. God met me where I was with his loving kindness. Even in my darkest place, God found me and made a way. Even when I fall, he lifts me up. By his mercy, by his grace, by his unending love. It wasn't meant or wrong to help me get right, get on my feet and start a new life. Above my wildest dreams I was lifted, once a felon but now forgiven, overcoming the past, turning to so much more than that. Started a business and a family, every day walking in God's grace and mercy. Even in my darkest place, God found me and made a way. Even when I fall, he lifts me up. By his mercy, by his grace, by his unending love. From darkness came the light, a light that led to a life lived right, led to a path to lift others up, to the blessings of God's mercy, grace and love, the grace and mercy never ending, a love beyond comprehending. He'll be right by your side in every up and down in life. Even in my darkest place, God found me and made a way. Even when I fall, he lifts me up. By his mercy, by his grace, by his unending love. Even when I fall, he lifts me up. By his mercy, by his grace, by his unending love.
That was Jaidyn LaBorde. Her mother, Jody Meyer, was my guest last week, and her husband, Mark Meyer, over there. Jaidyn, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
you all guys need to change names, okay? Because my mouth isn't working this
I
morning.
respond to everything. It's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I had a teacher who called me "Hey you" for 2 years. So
Yeah.
anyway, this song is actually what caused me to send a message to Garry over here because that was about his life. And so I asked him to come on and share his testimony and tell us about all the things in life he did before he found the Lord and how that's changed for him. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I was born December 27th, 1974. That was a Friday. The reason that's kind of important is because on that day there was a huge storm come through Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of laid the foundation for my life. A storm,
Yep.
a nonstop storm.
Yeah. We all go through those areas sometimes, don't we?
We did.
Now, were you raised with both your natural parents? I think you said earlier.
No, it wasn't. So my home life was kind of unusual. My actual biological father was in the military. He came back from home on leave and was on some train tracks with some buddies getting high, and a train hit him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he passed on. My mother, of course, moved on,
Mm-hmm.
and she came into a relationship with a gentleman named Danny. Um, Danny ran a chop shop, sold drugs, what have you, and he just lived a criminal lifestyle. My mother decided she didn't want to be part of that lifestyle, but she wasn't like normal mothers, where the key is take your child.
Mm-hmm.
She she left to go to the grocery store and left me with him and never came back.
Oh, wow. Okay. I threatened to do that to my son once, but I never did,
I got 3 children from my marriage, and there's days that I've thought of it. But I get them home, and I'm glad that they're home. So
Yeah.
I guess in a way I can understand her thought process a little
Mhm.
bit, but I mean, you would want to protect your child instantly.
Right. I don't know what my life would be like if I'd ever left my children. Actually, they're some of my best friends. So, you were raised by a man with a chop shop and drug dealing and so forth. Was he also cooking, cooking meth and things like that, or just selling for the most
Just
part?
selling. Um, Him and my grandfather, well, the man I call Grandpa, they ran it together. They was That was
Oh,
their
fam-
main.
family business.
Unfortunately, yes, it was family business. Um, it was. I was getting to be about 13, 14. Um, for my birthday, he decided it was time to tell me. And that's right at that age where you hit a rebellion as a child. You're
Right.
like, I don't really care what you're saying. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Mhm.
You're trying to discover yourself. There's a lot going on biologically within you. It's just it's a
Right.
confusing area. So he comes in for my birthday and he says, "Here, I want you to read these papers." And I'm reading this paperwork and I'm like, "You're not my dad." And it was, I mean, he had enough love for me that when my mom left, he fought to get custody of me.
Hmm.
Um, and he had custody, that he had adopted me as his. But I'm like, "You're not my dad. I don't want to be with you."
Right.
And he was all right. Well, if you want to be with your mom, and they located my mom in Texas, Angleton, Texas, and got over and said, "Hey, look, you don't want to be here," and
Hmm.
they sent me there.
Yeah, that would be difficult, especially at that age. 13-year-old boys don't move that well.
No, well, you don't move that well, and it was harder to find out the man that I had thought was my dad the whole time.
Hmm.
Was in blood dad. wasn't.
Right.
That wasn't something that I accepted well. I'm like, you've been lying to me. You've been,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on? You're not my dad. And so I have this understanding of what a dad is. As a child, I think this is who my dad's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And you find out who your father truly is, doesn't mean that he was with your mom in that manner.
Right. Yeah.
So I get to Texas and I'm there. And by this time, my mom had married a man named Michael Moyer. They'd had two girls. So I'm coming in, I've got two sisters, and I think, oh, life is going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
But I find out that that's not the case. So Michael, I was there almost 3 years. Michael spent those 3 years physically abusing me, sexually abusing me, mentally abusing me.
Not a good situation, no matter how you look at it. And
It's not.
I'm surprised that your mother would tolerate something like that. Or did she have any idea?
She found humor in it.
Oh, that's ridiculous. I'm
there
sorry.
would be days. Well, I mean, it was for me. It doesn't. I can't comprehend. Other than the fact that maybe she just never wanted me from the beginning. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
There was days where he would put an X on the refrigerator, and I would stand on my tippy toes, and if I come down, I would receive a beating.
Mm-hmm.
And she would be like, "Oh, you come down! Look, you come down!" And there was a real narcissistic personality within her that
Mm-hmm.
she found joy in it, dragging me through the house and by my testicles to the garage to be beaten. All these things.
I'm always amazed at the cruel nature of some parents, that they just can't understand. The Lord gave you this child to love and care for. And, I'm probably the biggest mama bear in the world. I brought in 90 kids in my home and I was mama bear for all of them. It's like, don't mess with my kid. So that concept is so foreign to me. And, but I should know because most of these kids, their parents kicked them out of the house with nothing but the clothes on their back. And so I took them in and I loved them all. They were amazing. They were a lot of fun. So you stayed there about 3 years. Did you go back to your stepfather or adopted father at that point, or you just float?
Well, as times got worse there at the house, um, I was seeking help. I needed help. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what to do. So the girls would go every Sunday. My two sisters would go every Sunday with a gentleman by the name of Garry Baker and his wife. They would take them to church.
Mm-hmm.
And when I come into the picture, so on Sundays they would take me with my sisters to church, and I found out about Jesus and the love, and and how He protects His little ones, and He's there for you, and all these things. And they're teaching us this at Sunday school, and I'm thinking, well, this is the guy that protects me.
Mm-hmm.
This is the guy that He's got me. So about 6 months into going to church, I gave my life to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And about 3 months after that, I become complete disillusioned with Christianity.
Yeah.
Because I was like, you're supposed to be protecting me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still being drugged through the house, and these things are still occurring to me.
Yeah.
How are you my protector, my savior? How are you not? It was.
Where's that lightning bolt?
Yeah, where's everything at? Because I'm reading the Bible about how you've protected other people or you've saved other people, but you're not doing none of this for me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I think that makes a lot of people disillusioned. They've got a concept in their brain about what Christ or the Lord's going to do for them, and they just don't get past that. Whenever, that's one thing I have about prosperity preachers, pardon me, but they're promising everything is going to be great and you're going to get all this money or you're going to do this or you're going to do that. God is not a bank. God is not a bank. God cannot pay your bills for you. And, there are things that we have to do here for Him. And, He's not physically present to protect us from whatever is going on. Excuse me, I have a horrible cough. But people get that in their mindset, and then they become disillusioned and fall away. So
And
that's.
even more so for a child.
Mm-hmm.
An adult might be able to understand those things, but at 14, 15 years old,
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking that this is the greatest person in the world. And granted, he is, if you truly understand.
Right.
But if you don't, you'll just,
You know,
you're done.
that's the Bible. That's basic instructions before leaving Earth. It's not a finger hut catalog where you can pick and choose what you want to order and have it come to your door. And so many of the prosperity preachers and so forth, that's kind of what they come across as. You're going to read this, and anything you think, anything you love, anything you want, it's going to come to you. And it's being a Christian is not that simple. There's a lot of work involved in it.
I remember thinking that I had an elder tell me that one day he said, well, you wouldn't want to start a new Christian reading the Old Testament because it's all wrath and vengeance, and you'll scare them to death.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll start them out with the New Testament, and it's all love and peace and joy and guidance. But they have to understand the two to truly understand
True.
Christianity.
Yeah, it takes both Old and New Testament. I know a lot of people these days try to throw the Old Testament out completely. And, there's a lot of stuff in there that you need to know. And there's a lot of warnings about what's coming and so forth, So you need to grasp both portions of the Bible. Now, through all of this, you finally managed to get yourself to prison. What happened there? What was going on?
So when I realized, I got to the point that I realized that the help that I was seeking, through Christ wasn't going to just, as we put it, that lightning bolt come down. I knew I had to do something because I wasn't going to live like that, and it just wasn't acceptable. My grandmother had a habit of, my mother's mother had a habit of coming down every year right before Christmas. And they would put me out of my bedroom, and she would take my bedroom, but she would bring huge amounts of cash to buy presents and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in one morning to get ready for school. I took the money from her purse, and a friend of mine from school had a car, and I was like, well, drive me to Houston. And he drove me to Houston. This was pre 9/11,
Mm-hmm.
or in the 80s. I walked into the kid and bought a plane ticket from Houston, Texas, back to St. Louis. And then when I landed in St. Louis, I started hitchhiking back towards Lebanon, Missouri. And someone picks me up and they drop me off. My dad knew I was coming. And when I got there, I told him what happened. And my dad told me that it would never happen again.
Right.
At that moment, my dad became my savior. He became that anchor in my life, and my goal was to make him happy. I started learning to cook meth. He's running the chop shop, stealing cars and bringing them to the chop shop. The goal is one day to be running it for him. And I'm thinking, whether than you buy this meth that you're selling, what greater pride would a father have than to be able to get the meth cooked by your son? Yeah, the thinking process wasn't that great, but that's where I was at with it. It was like anything to impress my Savior, anything to impress the person that I know
is going to protect you,
protect me and guide me. And it wasn't long after that. I sold a 1977 Stingray Corvette loaded down with guns to a young man there in town, and I told him, look, where it got stolen from, don't drive it. He went and picked a girl up, got caught in it, and he was like, there he is.
Mouth.
And so they arrested me, and that was the first trip to prison. And I'd go into prison, I'd come right back out with that mentality that I'm going to go right back at it. And from there, we had many trips to prison.
How many times were you in prison?
5 now.
5. My son managed to make that trip 3 times, but his was all alcohol related. They didn't like him driving without a license for some reason. It's like, well, you took it for 20 years.
They tend to frown on that. There's certain guidelines that they
Yeah,
want you to follow.
something about the law says this, so they got really grumpy with him.
Yeah.
Now, in our when we were living, my son was living. We lived in a small development there in Kansas City, and it got to where the police always knew his car and his face, and so they just kind of follow him and make sure that he did something wrong so they could arrest him again. Did they get to know you that well?
They got to know me that well. They would see the Mustang at that time. I was driving a green convertible Mustang, and my brother, which also owned that lifestyle, was driving a little old Cutlass Calais.
Hmm.
They knew the cars. The funny thing is, for us, it's humorous. We'll chuckle at it, but they knew the cars so well that they knew the colors, everything on them. But we knew our dad well enough to know that if we outran the cops, we could call him and pull the car into the shop, and within an hour come back out, and though the paint wouldn't be dry, the car would be a different color. I remember nights that we would call and say, "Hey, look, we're coming in hot,"
Hmm.
and the doors would be open. We'd go straight in. He'd close the doors, and within an hour, we'd be back in town with a whole new color on the car.
Oh wow, that's one way to get around, I guess. Try to keep the cops off you.
It didn't work quite as well because before long, of
They
course, the
figured out what was
plates,
going.
yeah, the plates, who we were
Hmm.
was obvious to them, how we were acting.
Yeah. Oh, did that ever cause your father issues with his chop shop? Did he ever get in trouble for that,
Um,
or not?
the day that the first time that they busted us, they were searching and searching and searching and searching, trying to catch us, but we were moving around so much at different houses and different
Hmm.
places we had put up that it was hard for them to get us. So on the initial arrest, 41 people got arrested.
Oh wow.
So they raided my dad's house and got him for marijuana. They gave him for the chop shop. They got him for marijuana. Everybody we knew was in jail
Hmm.
to the point that they were like, and they eventually got us.
Yeah. Put you all in the same jail. At least you'd know who you were visiting with.
They very quickly split us up out of the same jail.
Uh-huh. Yeah, probably so. They frown on that. They don't want you to have any friends.
Well, even when we got in there, we had no understanding about behavior
Hmm.
or how we. I mean, we had knocked the windows out of the jail and was throwing duffel bags or pillowcases with sheets tied up out the windows for people to put meth, whiskey, and
Oh, wow.
syringes and everything else in, and we would pull them back in, and we would just sit in there and get high.
Interesting. I don't think that's what you're supposed to be doing in jail. Last time I knew.
Definitely was not what they intended. And they split me and my brother up, and then they sent when we got to prison. They put me and him at the same camp, and that took about 2 weeks, and they split us from the same camps.
Hmm. Yep. It's they try to keep people away from those old contacts, hoping to rehabilitate you. Do you ever feel like they did anything to help you get off this path when you were in prison, or it's just do your time and get out and start all over again a lot of times?
Prison is a school,
Hmm.
and so it's like anything, or maybe a college more.
Hmm.
You can go in there and pick the electorate of maybe rehabilitating yourself or finding a path,
Hmm.
or you can go in there with the mentality that, oh man, they got me this time, and there's a whole nother school that's going on there that's teaching you ways around things, new ways of doing things,
How to make alcohol in prison.
make alcohol, new ways to cook meth.
Hmm.
I mean, I learned probably one of the best recipes I ever learned from a guy that was laying in a bed that was burnt head to toe.
Hmm.
The lab had exploded on him.
Wow.
And I thought, well, he obviously knows what not to do.
Yeah. If you've got burns over 90% of your body or something, you know that you made a mistake somewhere in that
And
step.
he knew exactly where, and was able to walk right down there with it. I mean, and even from inside the prison, people that are out here
Mm-hmm.
are willing to help you do wrong.
Right.
There's a author called Uncle Fester. He writes Secrets to Manufacturing Methamphetamines, plus a bunch of other books.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wrote him and said, hey, look, I'm in prison. They won't let me get your book, but I'd like to be able to do some studying while I'm here. And he put it all inside of a legal mail package with some legal papers on top and bottom and sent it in, and I had the whole book.
Oh, wow. Nothing like getting assistance while you're there. Somebody will
Guaranteeing you to return.
Mm-hmm. Guaranteeing you a trip right back into that same spot that you try to get yourself out of.
I kind of understand the concept now of not changing your DOC number.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, you get a new number each time you go. No, it's the same address.
It's the same number. It's going to follow you
address.
forever.
You know right where you're going. You know right where you're going because
my son could always remember his DOC number. He might not remember his social security number, but he always knew his DOC number.
Between two states, I ran from Missouri to try to avoid being violated here on parole. Went to Indiana and got there, and I was unbelievable. I'm thinking, oh, I'm changing, and we're not doing this. I'm not going to do this. When I get there, it's get a job or get back to doing what I do. And within 3 weeks, they had me locked up in Indiana and sentenced me to 24 years.
Oh, wow. That's a long time. Is that auto theft or drugs or what?
That was burglaries, multiple
burglaries. Yeah.
So I had never had a drug charge.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Most people I talk to have had drug charges around here.
Never got a drug charge. It's always been stealing or identity thefts,
mm-hmm.
things like that. It's never been a drug charge, which had I had a drug charge, I probably wouldn't have realized God was working in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, drugs kind of flip your brain to the other side, and you can't really understand what's going on around you whenever you get into that. So.
Oh, I was using. I
mm-hmm.
used over. I was 8 ball a day myself, personal use for methamphetamines.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, having been arrested, I had never been arrested for any type of drugs. I thought,
yeah, that makes you a choir boy in some situations, some towns.
Some situations. For me, though, God used that to wake me up.
Mm-hmm.
So
what brought you to waking up?
What
happened to bring that change in your life?
I'm back out of prison, back in Laclede County, Wright County, doing my usual, selling drugs, stealing, acting ignorant,
mm-hmm.
just doing what I want to do. I get arrested. 41 felony counts.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
That's a lot. And then I'm looking at this, and I call my dad, and I'm like, hey, this got me on 41 felony counts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to need help. And he gets me a really good attorney. And I'm thinking, with a good attorney, you can get out of anything. I've gotten real low sentences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this will be perfect for me. He comes in and he's talking to him, and he's like, Garry, there's nothing they want to do. They're not moving. They're not budging on it. This would have been my 5th time through prison. 3 strike law in Missouri. You're not going to come back out. You're done.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, they said, really, there's nothing I can do. They're not. And honestly, at that point, you become exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
You're tired of running from the cops, tired of everything. I had several attempts to kill myself because I didn't want to be here no more or be alive. I was just done
mm-hmm.
prior to being arrested. So I get into the sentencing area or the time to go, and I think, well, I'm going back to prison for the rest of my life, and I'm okay with that because it's home. It's become a home to me in a manner,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, some people just get acclimated to the correctional facilities and decide that, I don't know any different, so I want to stay there. You decided then, I guess, to walk away from all that, and
no, not really.
not really.
No, so they come in and the courts say, we're going to give you 1 year drug treatment. And I tell my attorney, Sean Randall, I'm like, I've never had a drug charge. And he's like, just be quiet and take it. It's a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, well, 41 counts, you're giving me a year in prison. So I've done a year, I've done 18 months, I've done 2 years in solitary confinement at times. So just a year in prison is nothing. As the inmates say, we can do that standing on our heads. So my thought was, cool, in a year, I'm coming out of prison and I'm going to be able to go right back to doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be right back to selling drugs and stealing and raising Cain.
Yeah.
And I called my dad and look, they're giving me a year. Just had my car ready to go, cleaned up, go ahead and throw some more paint on it. And I'll be ready. I'll be home in a year. We'll get back to business. And they sentenced me to that year, and they sent me to this drug treatment program. And I'm thinking, well, it's just a year. I don't care whether I do it in the program or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to follow the restrictions of the program. I don't want to follow the rules of the program. I don't want to do nothing with the program. I'm disrupting the program.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, to the point that they're like, look, we're probably going to put him out of the program.
Right.
And I'm just completely disrupting it. Oh, I get a call one day to go out and see my casework manager. And I go out there and I'm like, what kind of, what's going on? They're like, so we've got to read you some warrants.
Mm-hmm.
So they read me 3 felony warrants for Wright County, 2 robberies and a burglary. And I thought, all right. So I go back and I call my dad, and my dad calls the attorney, and they get the paperwork done. They pull me out to Wright County, and they take me to Wright County. Well, we get to Wright County, and we go up and do the initial hearing, and they're like, well, 60 years is what we want.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, again, I'm all right with that because, A, I had done the crime.
Mm-hmm.
The other part was I was tired.
Right.
I didn't want to keep being out here around it no more. I didn't really care to live in a structured environment. I was comfortable in prison.
Mm-hmm.
So I was all right with it. So Sean says, look, tomorrow we're going to bring you back up to court. We'll do preliminaries and we'll do all that. And then we'll get going. And 60 years is what they're wanting. And I'm like, I'm good for it. Actually, my girlfriend that I had at the time was testifying against me because she had drove away from one of the robberies. So I was like, all right, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I go back in. When I come back into the Wright County jail to the cell, Wright County jail is made from an old battleship. They cut it up and made cells out of it.
Oh, wow.
So it's absolutely uncomfortable as it could get. The guys in there had got the bright idea to riot several times, so they have burnt the mattresses and everything that needed to be on the in there. So you get 2 blankets. They give you a bologna sandwich at lunch. In the morning, they give you 2 oatmeal packets that aren't cooked. You've got to get water and make it. It's not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But in this cell that's supposed to hold 6 men, there's like 9 men.
Oh, wow. That's way too crowded.
Yeah, it was crowded. But when I come in, they were having a Bible study. And again, I was disillusioned with God for everything that was going on. So prayer wasn't on my list of things to do. Getting high was, or seeing what I could get into was, but prayer wasn't. They did their Bible study. You learn a code of ethics, I guess, from being inside. And one is you kind of respect each man's religion. You don't really press them about it. You don't disrupt it. So while they did this Bible study, I just sat back and let them do their thing. They got ready to pray, and I just bowed my head. They prayed for a good outcomes for everybody. They prayed for the men's families, and they prayed for each other. And then everybody said amen, myself included. That night, so that next morning I went up to the courtroom, and I walked into the courtroom. Sean says, I don't know what happened, but they won't change their mind. So I'm like, okay, so what's going on? He says, they want to they want to sentence you to run with the treatment program you're doing. And I'm like, all right. And he's like, so don't say nothing. Don't ask the judge nothing. Just let them do this and be done with this.
Right.
So they sentenced me. Of course, I don't be quiet. So I'm asking the judge, are you certain that I'm getting out? And the judge is telling me, I don't know why the prosecutor wants to do this or why we're even doing this. It doesn't make sense, but I'm going to go with his recommendation. And yeah,
Praise
I
God.
don't know if it'll change your out date or what it'll be, but we're going to send you with the treatment program you're in. I was like, man, it didn't really make sense to me at that time. So I'm back sitting in the jury box, and I'm waiting for the other guys that are there that are in court that day before they go back to the jail. Sean comes over and he says, Gary, I don't know who you're praying to, but you need to keep praying. Now, this guy has represented me a lot in life, and he's never talked to me about God or nothing like that. And for me, with him saying that, it's been 25, 30 years since I've prayed. Since I've talked to God at all.
I bet that got you talking to him a whole lot more, didn't it?
It got my attention real well. So as I'm getting back on the bus and they're taking me back to the treatment program, I'm like, most people are excited to get back because their commissary is there or their tablets there, or they can get on the phone and talk to their people or what have you. I wanted to get back because I wanted to see my Bible. The Bible that had been in the bottom of my box that I hadn't touched all along. But I wanted to see it. I wanted to see why. I wanted to see what's the purpose behind this.
He wanted to bring you to a full being instead of what you'd been doing. You'd been scattered for a long time. And the Lord is really good about bringing us all back to where He wants us to be.
You know what it was like? At that moment when my eyes opened, I see a different way, a different life. So I'll start reading it and I'm thinking, there's still that part of me that's like, oh, this don't make sense. I'm reading about how Christ brought Lazarus back. That was one of the first things I read, and I'm reading this story in this Bible, and I'm like, this makes no sense. Because he goes on to say, I'll do greater things than him. And I'm thinking, there's no way possible. Who am I? I can cook some dough for you, or I can steal your car, or I can break into your house, I can mess your life up. But how can I do greater things than Christ? And the more I contemplated on the Lazarus, I thought, man, ain't that what I'm doing right now? Ain't that what I'm doing? I'm resurrecting myself from the dead. I'm bringing myself back to a life. And it was a focus for me, and it was a drive for me. I didn't understand how or why, but I knew that there was God moving in my life. I slept in bed 3 of that treatment center directly across from that, hung the serenity prayer above the door. And for someone who's never really obeyed authority, having to learn to accept authority required that prayer a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're running out of time here, but you've moved past all that, and you're now with what is it?
Roadside.
Affordable roadside, and doing well there. And you've got a wife and kids, or just kids, or
I've got a wife, 3 boys, my daughters in my life, my grandsons in my life.
that's all good. It's amazing what the Lord can do when you open your heart and let Him in. And that's where some people get lost and confused. If they don't get an immediate response from the Lord, they figure He's not listening. And that's not the case.
He's definitely there, and the Lord will place sometimes obstacles
Mm-hmm.
or things in your path that are necessary to maybe keep you in check for a better word.
Mm-hmm.
Like even after I come back and got into God, I had 2 more warrants read for me in each county, and they told me I wasn't getting out on that outdate.
Well, I'm glad you got out on that outdate. Now, we're going to have to close, but maybe we can convince Garry to come back and tell us some more about his life and how things are going. Because he's got an amazing story. And then you've got a thing coming up October the 27th, I believe, at Life 360.
Spin for lights.
Yeah. And so you can hear him there also. And Jaidyn will be singing again, understanding. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you again next week.